So Dr. Zeki Saritoprak is a professor and director of the Nursi Chair in Islamic Studies here at John Carroll. His research focuses on Islamic theology, spirituality, and eschatology, as well as Islamic approaches to the environment. He is actively engaged in interfaith dialogue and including participating in the Catholic-Muslim dialogue that's co-sponsored by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Islamic Society of North America. And every year, he sponsors a week of Islamic art and culture at John Carroll, and I've participated in. It's wonderful. If you have a chance, I would encourage you to come back and join in. And he serves as a mentor to the increasing number of Muslim students on our campus. His recent books include Islam's Jesus and Islamic Spirituality, Theology and Practice for the Modern World. And today he will be speaking on Islam for Christians. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Zeki Saritoprak.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. So my topic is basically faith and practice of Islam. It's a large topic. It takes like one semester, but we'll reduce it to 45 minutes. So the plan is we'll have this topic for 45 minutes, and then after that, I will give time for Q&A session. So feel free to have any question, and then maybe I will ask you some questions. So maybe I will put you in a group, and then like several groups, and then ask you some questions and see if you have some ideas on those questions as well. If you have time, we will see. So basically, since Deborah mentioned that, my book, Islam's Jesus, I will go to the end and start with Mary in Islam, because we are talking about, the Christianity which is part of Islam, or Islam which is part of Christianity, whatever you look at it. Mary is a very significant figure in the Quran. In fact, there is a chapter named after Mary in the Quran. And we have a long story about how Mary's mother, although we don't have her name in the Quran, but in the commentaries of the Quran, we know her name as Hannah, or Anne. I think now we call her mother as Anne. She is asking God to give her a boy, but then she becomes pregnant and she has a daughter. And she says, Lord, you know that boys and girls are not similar. I have a daughter. I asked you a boy. And therefore, her intention was to dedicate this boy to the temple. Well, eventually, again, she did it. She dedicated Mary to the temple, so her prayer was accepted. Some Muslims would say, God accepted her prayer in a better way. To have a regular boy or to have a daughter like Mary. Which one is better, So basically, God accepted her prayer in a better way, in a much fruitful way. There is a chapter in the Quran named after her, chapter 19. And she is perhaps the most frequent mentioned woman in the Quran. I would say like other prophets, Noah, Abraham, almost at the same level. She's mentioned in the Quran. Similar, I put this a kind of comparison. Luke 1:26-38 will be similar to the Quranic verses of chapter 3, verse 35-47. because it's about the birth of Jesus. It's a long story. Mary becomes, angel appears to Mary. She's not married, she is single. She is in the Quranic language, actually. She was never touched by any human being. An angel appears to her and says, you will become pregnant. God will give you a pure child. And she says, how this can happen? I have not been touched by any human being. And the angel, which is believed that Angel Gabriel, says, when God says for something be, it happens. That's it. For God, there is no difficult thing. When God says for something be, command be, it happens. And she becomes pregnant, and then God inspires her that when she takes her baby to her people, she remains silent. Don't speak. Just when they ask you something, just speak with language of sign language. So, to make a long story short, Mary takes her baby. She gives birth to Jesus, and she takes Jesus to her people. Well, immediately they accuse her of committing adultery. Where did you get this baby, Mary? That was the question. Imagine that society, which is adultery is a crime that woman is stoned. And now Mary is holding a baby. She's not married. It's really very difficult. And that's why Mary, the Quran refers to her grief, to her difficulty. She says, I wish I was never being created. I was just being forgotten. That shows how she had a difficult time. But because God inspired her not to speak, when they said, where did you get this baby? She points at the baby, as if she says, don't ask me, ask the baby. I don't know, ask the baby, So that's very interesting. Generally, the Holy Book of Islam, the Quran, is very concise. But in this case, it gives details. And they say, how can we talk to a baby who is in his cradle? And immediately, Jesus speaks from his cradle. It's believed that Jesus was 5 days old, like newly born baby. And he says, I am the servant of God. Peace be upon me when I was born. Peace be upon me when I am grown up. Peace be upon me when I die. Peace be upon me when I am resurrected. God commanded me to pray, to give charity, to be kind to my mother. With this, it's like a remarkable statement of Jesus in the Quran, actually. It's, very powerful statement. Jesus declares the innocence of his mother. The Quran doesn't go further about the continuation of the story, but it is understood that her people were not in a position to accuse her anymore. At least they were surprised. There was a baby who was speaking from his cradle. And Muslims will consider this as a miracle of Jesus. When he spoke from his cradle, one of his miracles, and Jesus is the only person who spoke from his cradle in the Islamic teaching. Other prophets, there are many prophets in the Quran, 20, as we will see now, 28 prophets are mentioned in the Quran by name. None of them have spoken from their cradle. Jesus is the only person in the Quran. So, the story of Joseph, interestingly, Joseph is not mentioned in the Quran. There is one Joseph mentioned in the Quran, and that is Prophet Joseph, who is the son of Jacob, the king of Egypt, became the king of Egypt. So that Joseph is mentioned in the Quran. There is a chapter named after him. But Joseph, as we know in the Christian tradition as fiancé of Mary, there is no mention of him in the Quran per se. In the commentaries of the Quran, in the commentaries, we have some reference to him as a pious person, like a saint, helping Mary. Never married Mary. In the Islamic teaching, Mary never married. She didn't marry. And Joseph was a helper, not a husband for Mary, basically. Purified and chosen, some Quranic verses. This is about her purification. God has chosen you, Mary, over all women of the world and purified you. This is, in the Quran about Mary. There is a hadith. Hadith is the saying of Prophet Muhammad. So the hadith, the Prophet says, she is one of the best women that ever existed together with Aisha, Khadija, and Fatima. Mary, with this list of holy women, Mary is among them, is the top, and in paradise she is like the head of the women of paradise, the highest in paradise. So Mary is very significant personality. These personalities, Aisha is Muhammad's wife, Khadija, Muhammad's first wife. When she passed away, Muhammad married Khadija. And Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, which is a very significant figure. These three personalities are also very significant figures in Islam. And then the birth of Jesus, I think we mentioned. Jesus in the Quran, is mentioned in 90 verses. And we have many miracles of Jesus in the Quran. He is one of the miracles of Jesus. Surely I came to you with a sign from your Lord. I create from clay the likeness of a bird. Then I breathe into it and it becomes a bird by God's permission. So in the Quranic narrative, one of the miracles of Jesus is that he was able to make the form of a bird from clay into a real bird. He would breathe into it, and this clay would become bird flying. Sometimes I joke, I say, could you please try, if you can make something like that, Well, that was Jesus. That was in the Muslim tradition, the breath of Jesus was a miracle. Through the breath of Jesus, a clay was becoming a real bird. It was a miracle. But I underline this point that in Islam, it was by God's permission. God empowered Jesus to do that. It was through the power of God. Jesus was doing this as a miracle to show people that I am speaking on behalf of God. I am not speaking in vain. That was the message of Jesus, as mentioned in the Quran. So Jesus, in the Quranic language, was speaking on behalf of God and declaring the message of God to people. Okay, how do we know that? Well, here is his miracle. This miracle is evidence in the Islamic theology that God changed his rules, natural laws, for his sake. That means he was speaking on behalf of the owner of natural laws, so he can change. And that is the meaning of miracles, basically, to have, to be extraordinary. And that's why Muslims would say, like other prophets of God, like Abraham, Moses, Jesus was also speaking on behalf of God, and he was declaring the message of God to people. And then there are many other miracles. We perhaps maybe another time we will elaborate on that. Jesus is also known as the prophet of love. One Islamic scholar takes this from Jesus. He says, to love, love, and to hate, hatred. That's the message, actually the essence of the message of the Quran as well. To love, love, and to hate, hatred. If you love, love, love will increase. If you hate, hatred, hatred will decrease. So there is nothing actually deserves hatred more than hatred itself, basically. And then I will go back now to the main topics that we have.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
So, did Mary have, in Islamic faith, do you believe Mary had free will, or did God just...
It's a very good question. Basically, in Islam, people have free will. But sometimes God, chooses somebody, and they accommodate to the divine command through their free will. So
Would you have said no?
Mary, she could have said no in a sense that she could act differently. She could have acted differently. She could have acted differently. From Islamic theological perspective, it's really very theoretical. But for example, chosen people, prophets are chosen. They are chosen, but at the same time, when they are chosen, they have to act according to that choice. If they deviate from the way that they are chosen, that command, that divine message that is given to them will be taken away. So God has chosen, actually very clearly, the Quran says Mary was chosen. God has chosen Mary, but Mary also acted in a way that she was chosen through her free will. And that's why she was doing everything that was possible to accommodate the divine message, the divine command that God gave to her. To protect the baby Jesus, for example. To pray, the Quran speaks of her constant prayer. Even asks Muslims to imitate Mary in her prayer. So she had free will. Islamically speaking, she had free will. But to be chosen is not through your will, it's through God's will. But acting according to the way that you are chosen is your free will. So they basically, if people go to the other direction, they will be against the divine choice. And it's possible. They can do that, basically. They have free will to do that. Okay. Sometimes it is... So now, coming to the beginning of our topic, 6 articles of faith. Believe in God, believe in God's angels, believe in His scriptures, His messengers, His destiny. The reason I made Jesus and Mary first, because I was afraid that we'll not be able to finish it, so I put them first. 5 pillars of Islam: Shahada, which is testimony of faith. Salat, prayer 5 times a day. Zakat, alms giving. Saum, fasting. And Hajj, pilgrimage. So basically, to give you like a sense of Muslims in the world, it's important to know. When we say Islam, what is Islam? Who are Muslims? Where are they living? So if you look at this map, like Australia, for example, I was actually in Australia the summer before, and they are joking. They say we are at the bottom of the world. It looks like they are at the bottom of the world. It's very far away. It takes about 16 hours flying from Los Angeles to Melbourne. About 10% of the population of Melbourne is Muslim. So we have Muslims in Australia. It's very interesting. I don't know how they ended up there. Indonesia, Indonesia is the largest Islamic nation. Largest Islamic nation. We have about 260 million population of Indonesia, and 93% is Muslim in Indonesia. It's very large country, and interestingly, Indonesians are not Arabs. In the same way, in China, we have a good number of Muslims. China, I think there is an account that we have about 120 million Muslims in China. The number of Muslims in China is greater than the number of all Muslims in the Middle East. And very interestingly, we have no word about Muslims in China. They are just forgotten.
Are those the Uyghurs?
Muslims?
The Uyghurs, is that who they are?
Uyghurs are part of them. They are actually Chinese origin Muslims. I think they are known as Huis. And it's very interesting, Muslims arrived there in a very early time. There are some graves of companions of Muhammad in China. And there's a big number, like a huge number of Muslims there. India, for example, again, we have a very good population of Muslims in India. As you know, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh were one country. And at that time, actually, Muslims were majority. But then division made Muslims minority. Still, we have a good number of Muslims. I think maybe about 200 million Muslims in India, approximately. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, these were former Soviet Union countries. When they received their independence, they became independent Muslim states. They are Muslims, and now they are independent. Initially, they were part of the Soviet Union, and now they are independent states. And then Iran, Iraq, these are Muslim countries. Saudi Arabia, as you know, in the middle. Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam. Islam was born in Mecca. Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, was born in Mecca. The Quran was revealed partially in Mecca and partially in Medina, another city which is about 280 miles from Mecca. And Muslims, as we will see, for pilgrimage, they go to Saudi Arabia. It's a part of Islamic faith. And then coming to the United States, we have, according to perhaps the most accurate data, about 9 million Muslims in the United States. There are some references that about 3 million, some say about 20 million. So I think the most accurate number is about 9 million Muslims in the United States. And then we have two groups of Muslims. This map also helps a little bit. We have Shiite Muslims, Sunnite Muslims. Shiite Muslims basically are the minority. About 15% of Muslims are Shiite. And about 85% of Muslims are Sunnite. So, as we see, only Iran in the Islamic world is a Shiite country. It's a long story. Initially, Iran was not a Shiite, but in the Middle Ages, when Shah Ismail from Azerbaijan took over that land, and he was a Shiite, he converted many Sunni Muslims into Shiite tradition. And from that on, that area remained Shiite, and still it is Shiite. So Ottomans defeated him. There's like a long story. We don't need to get into history, but basically initially that area was Sunnite, but it is Shiite now. And it is the only Islamic country, a Shiite Islamic country. The difference between Shiite and Sunnite, I would say it's not very big theological differences. Mostly, I would say political. Shiite is much more politically oriented. And the reason for the division between these two sects of Islam is leadership. In the beginning of Islam, when Muhammad passed away, that was a debate. Who would be his successor? In 632, Common Era, when Muhammad passed away, there was a debate about the succession of Muhammad. So a group of Muslims said, well, we have in Islam meritocracy, not heritocracy. So the one who has greater merit should be the leader. But a group of Muslims, which was minority, a small group, they said, well, we have to have the closest relative male, the closest male relative of the Prophet to be his successor, like other kingdoms. And this group became Shiite because they claimed that Ali, the cousin of the Prophet, and he was also the son-in-law of the Prophet, was supposed to be the Caliph, the successor of Muhammad. But the majority of Muslims said, no, we should have elections. And they had elections, and actually Abu Bakr, a friend of Muhammad and wise person, elder person, was elected as being the head of Muslim community. And that, from that on, this tradition of Shiite started, basically. So it's a long story again. I am shorting it. Yes, please.
The percentages again?
15% approximately. 15% of Muslims are Shiite. 85% of Muslims are Sunnite. And then the first article of faith. Now, going to the article of faith, there are 6 articles. Actually, when we say Islam, the first thing comes to our mind would be the 6 articles of faith. And the second will be the 5 pillars of Islam. So today we are going to cover them briefly, because each of them actually deserves a separate lecture. So basically, believe in God. In Islam, to believe in God is the most important thing. It's the foundation of everything. Everything starts with it, to believe in God. And that's why even, because this faith is so strong in the Islamic teaching, when you start eating, for example, you invoke the name of God. You say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. When you drive, you say this name. When you walk, you say this name. It's so important part of the Islamic tradition, to believe in God and to have this constantly. Every good thing that you start, the Prophet says, start with this formula. Every good thing. You start your computer. I even saw some people have in their computer, it starts loudly. The computer starts with it, It can be organized that way. So in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. That is like the formula that's considered a sign of Islam, basically, because of this belief in God. I said it is easy to say, but there are countless levels of belief. So to believe in God, it is easy statement, but there are levels. And that's why Muslims would say, our level of faith is not at the level of the faith of Muhammad, or not at the level of the faith of Jesus. So there are many levels, and it is suggested that one has increased the level of his or her faith as much as possible. It can be increased, through piety, through good deeds, through charity, etc. Variety of good things that can be done, and that increases the faith, actually. God has 99 names in Islam. 99 names actually, like kind of indication of multiplicity. There are many names of God. The Prophet said 99 names. Anyone who memorizes it will enter paradise. And I said, is it so easy to enter paradise? Just memorize it, But it's understood that if you practice the application of them, like God is Al-Rahim, the most merciful. If you are merciful to human beings and to the realm of creation, then you are actually reflecting that divine name. God is Al-Rahman, the most compassionate. God is al-adl, the most just. When you deal with people, deal justly, etc. These beautiful names of God, if they are reflected in the life of a human being, that human being will be in paradise. That's what's meant actually by memorizing them, by applying and becoming reflection of these divine names. And then Allah and God is the same concept. Allah is the God, basically. And sometimes if you, in some media, in some new internet websites, you may see that Allah is a different God. Is absolutely wrong. Muslims, Christians, and Jews have the same concept of, Allah is the same God. The Quran clearly says, Allah is the God of Jesus, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. So the same God, it's not different God. Yes,
If you're
please.
teaching this and you have kids who struggle with it, and you go to Bible Gateway and you go to a Bible passage that they suggest, like in the beginning God, or for God to love the world, and then you have it in English text, and then you go to the drop-down menu and pick the Arabic text. When the Arabic text of that Bible passage shows up, you just blow it up, and there's the word Allah.
You are right,
If
yes.
you're an evangelical and you're handing out Bibles to Arabic speakers, it says Allah in Genesis 1.
Yes.
It says Allah in John 3:16, because it's just the word God.
Absolutely.
For those kids, it's a moment like, oh, he's not just saying that, it's actually in the Bible.
In the Bible, yes. Actually, it
It's
is
a
in the
little trick
Bible.
that you can use that's very convincing.
Yes. Actually, in the Arabic Bible, it is Allah.
Right,
And Arab Christians are also saying Allah.
right. They don't believe it, though.
You are right.
They think it's the Muslim God.
Yeah, they think that it's Muslim God.
Right.
Yes, you are right. So, angels, the second pillar of the second articles of faith is to believe in angels. Muslims believe in angels. And they are real creatures. They are not like superstitious. They are real creatures in Islam. They are created from light. They have a body, but subtle body. And like human beings, they are considered as comprising a nation in the sight of God, angels. And they are constantly worshiping God. Angels have no free will. They are commanded, they are do whatever God commands them to do. They cannot disobey God. They are just created that way. They are pure, obedient to God. Unlike human beings can be obedient and disobedient. Yes, please.
So is there not a similar, like in Christianity, there's Satan obviously is an angel that disobeys?
Yes, that's a very good question. In Islam, actually, Satan was not an angel. He was a jinn. There is another category in Islam, jinn, J-I-N-N. I think in English sometimes we say genie. Genie. Jinn, Satan was a genie among angels. And when God created Adam, God asked all angels to bow down before Adam as a respect for this new creation by God's hand. All angels obeying God's command, Satan says, no, I will not. And he said, I'm better than him because you created me from fire, you created him from soil. Fire is stronger than soil. And that's why Muslims generally will say the first racist in history was Satan. Because he referred to his origin. I am better than him. So Satan was a different category. He was not an angel in the Islamic teaching. And then we have four of archangels, Gabriel, Michael, Seraphiel, Azrael. Each have their duties. Gabriel, Jabrail in the Muslim tradition, he was bringing revelation to the messengers of God. So he met with Jesus. He brought revelation to Jesus. He brought to Muhammad, to Moses. So all these prophets of God would receive revelation through angel Gabriel. Michael's duty is to be the head of all farmer angels, like agricultural. Irrigating of the planet is under the leadership of Michael, angel Michael. In Islam, he is remarkable. He is one of the greatest angels in the Islamic teaching. Seraphiel's job is to blow the trumpet when the end of time comes. Azrael is known as the angel of death. When the time of death comes, Azrael or one of his helpers take the spirit, the soul of people, and taking to the realm of spirits, and then later to paradise, if not the opposite, And then scriptures, again, Muslims have to believe in the scriptures of God. The Torah, Muslims believe that Torah was revealed to Moses, Psalms was revealed to David, Gospel was revealed to Jesus, and Quran was revealed to Muhammad. So in the very young age, Muslims teach their children. We believe in the 4 great books of God: the Torah, the Psalms, the Gospel, and the Quran, basically. So these are, like essential books of God. The Quran speaks of, for example, the scroll of Abraham. We don't have reference to them, but the Quran speaks of them. So Abraham also received a scripture, basically. And all these 4 books are mentioned by name in the Quran, and the Quran refers to them as holy books, as divine revelations. So, for example, a Muslim has to believe in the gospel. They might have some thoughts about the translations, because in Islam, the translation of the Quran is not the Quran. It is the translation of the Quran. So the same they will say for the Bible as well. So when they speak of this, they speak of the original format of those revelations. Original of them, they were divine revelations, came through Angel Gabriel to these messengers of God. The Torah, some verses on the Torah, let me skip. Gospel, the name of the gospel is Injil. And both the Torah and the Gospel are mentioned several times. I think Injil is mentioned maybe about 12 times in the Quran. For example, this verse is from the Quran. We have sent Injil to Jesus, in which there is guidance and light. If you read the Gospel, according to the Quran, there is guidance and light in it. And this is true for the Quran. Yes, please.
When you say gospel, do you mean the 4 gospels of the scripture, or do you mean the idea of the story?
That's a very good question. Muslims, interestingly, they use singular form, like one gospel. They don't have the concept of 4 gospels. And this one gospel, I try to make a sense of it. In modern scholarship, there is something called Q gospel. And perhaps that Q gospel will be more compatible with what the Quran says. It was like a source gospel. These canonical gospels are actually from that source gospel. And I think that's what the Quran perhaps referring to, the major gospel, the main gospel that synoptic gospels are referring to. And the Quran, as the holy book of Islam, for the sake of time, let me go a little bit further. Okay. Believe in the prophets, again, is one of the articles of faith. Muslims believe in the prophets of God. There are many prophets in Islam. One narration, the sayings of the prophet says that there were 124,000 prophets came before Islam. Muslims believe in all of them. Excuse me. We don't know their names. Some of them are mentioned by name in the Quran. So, this verse, we have sent no messenger save with the tongue of his people. Something came to my, maybe allergy, I think. So each prophet had a specific message according to the needs of the time, but the essence of all prophets' message was the same. All of them, according to the Quranic teaching, believed in one God. They said, "O people, come and believe in one God. Avoid idolatry, avoid worshipping idols." And as I said, I mentioned this, I think the most important prophets, the most important, they are known as the possessors of steadfastness, are Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. If you say who are the most important people in human history, these five people are the answer. That means forget Aristotle, forget Plato, these giants of philosophy. These five people are the most important people in human history, and until the end of time, from an Islamic theological perspective. Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. They are known as Ulul Azm, as the possessors of steadfastness, and they are the highest of all prophets of God. And the Quran, we have many prophets by name. Just to give you an example, Enoch, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, chapter named after him, Jethro, which is Shu'aib, again a prophet of God, Job, Jonah, Moses, Aaron, Elijah, David, Solomon, Daniel, John. John the Baptist, is mentioned by name in the Quran. Jesus and Muhammad. These are some names of the Quran. We have about 28 prophets mentioned by name in the Quran. The first prophet was Adam, according to the Islamic teaching, and the last prophet was Muhammad. So Muslims believe that the prophethood ended with Muhammad. After Muhammad, there will be sainthood, there will be revivalism, but no more prophets. It is ended. He is the final prophet in the Muslim teaching. And then believe in the afterlife. Again, Muslims believe that there is a life after this life. There is a life after this life. So when people die, they don't go for nothing. They go to eternal place. So there will be resurrection, and all people will be resurrected after the end of time. So there is the concept of afterlife, and it's very strong in the Islamic teaching. One can say 1/3 of the Quran is related to the concept of afterlife. It is so important because it is the final destination of human being. Basically, human beings are here to gain the afterlife. This world is like a farm. The afterlife is the place that you harvest. Basically, you sow seeds here, and you harvest them in the afterlife. So you do good deeds, and you may never get the result of it. And you may never, and you should even not expect the result. You just do it and leave it for the afterlife. The afterlife will be the time when you harvest. And that's why there is a statement, I think in Turkish language, it says, when you do good things, like give food, for example, to the fish. The Turkish word is very beautiful. It's like rhyming, but in the English one will not be rhyming. Give food to the fish. If the fish doesn't know it, the creator of the fish knows it. That's the meaning of it. Yeah, you give charity to some people. They may not know it. It doesn't matter. But there is one who knows everything. And that is the idea. You do it for the sake of God without expecting anything in return, basically. And then the hour, we don't know exactly when the final moment of human history will come. There are many verses about this in the Quran. No doubt about it, and only God knows when it will happen. But there is no doubt about it. And then scales in the afterlife, there will be scales. Good deeds and bad deeds will be weighed. And it's very interesting. If your good deeds are more than your bad deeds, you are among the people of paradise. So, and sometimes quality is more not sometimes, exactly, quality is more important than quantity. You may have some actions that really delete maybe hundreds of negative actions of you. One action, because it was very important as far as quality is concerned. So, and sometimes you don't know. Just a small thing might be really very important. We have narratives that a woman who gave water to a dog. She saw a dog was, looking for water, and on a well, and as you know, dog cannot get into the well, so dog is thirsty but looking for water and unable to get water. So what she does, she takes off her shoes and sends down to the well, and then get some water and give to the dog. The prophet says God put that woman into paradise just for that action, because of her compassion, because of her kindness to this thirsty animal. So sometimes you don't know, apparently it is not like a significant action, but in the sight of God, that was so significant that God said she deserves paradise for this. So something like this. And that's why in Islam it says, never degrade any action. All good actions are important. Even they are small. They are important. And then the judgment day, the day of judgment, I think we elaborate on that. Qadar is another article of faith. And this is one of the 6 articles of faith, that there is a divine plan for everything. There is a divine plan. Everything is based kind of going through a blueprint. Let's say the trees. Why these tree that we see, the leaves of tree are not 200 meters or 2 meters. They come to a point and they stop. Why our hair and our eyebrows are not growing at the same level? We might have like a kind of physical explanation. Okay, we have less hormones going to our, let's say, eyebrows, and then more hormones going to hair. But this is explaining how. It doesn't explain why. Yeah, how is okay. We can find out, through our modern technology and medical sciences. But when it comes to why, that is a divine wisdom. That's what Islamic tradition says, qadar. It is a blueprint. It comes to a certain point and stops. Let me share a joke about this with you. It's in the Muslim tradition. We have a very important personality who is known for his humors. Once he is sitting under a walnut tree, and there is a farm next to him. He looks at the walnut tree and he looks at the farm. He sees a watermelon there, walnuts on the top of the tree. And then he says, Lord, I know that we are not supposed to question your wisdom, but really I don't understand why you put this big watermelon, and connected to this tiny vine, and these little walnuts to this big tree. It doesn't make sense. It has to be, like the big one on the big one and the small one to the small one. That's what he says. And while he's contemplating, a walnut drops over his head. And he says, now I got my message, Actually, I got my answer. How about if it was a watermelon, falling over his head? That would be disaster. So actually, that suggests that everything has a wisdom. Everything is according to divine wisdom and according to the blueprint that God actually put. The creation is acting that way, basically. So everything is measured. Everything is divine, based on the divine measurement. And for God, there is nothing difficult, actually. And then something on human actions, I think we can skip this one. Now, coming to 5 pillars of Islam, the first pillar is Shahada, to testimony of faith. There is no deity but God, and Muhammad is God's messenger. A person believes this in his heart, in the sight of God, that person is a Muslim, regardless of anything. And even scholars of Islam would say, sometimes I see people going to the mosque and declaring their, faith, that they conversion. But Islamically speaking, there is no any need for declaration. It's because God looks at the hearts, not at the appearance. It's very clear in the Quran. So this is like a main door of Islam. Once a person says, not only lip service, but believes in his heart or her heart, that person is a Muslim in the sight of God. He is considered, or she is considered, a Muslim in the sight of God, not in the sight of the community, because nobody knows the hearts. Yes, please.
So, in a weird way, could you be a Christian Muslim?
Actually, there is an Islamic scholar. Actually, he says that even he uses the title Christian Muslim, exactly as you said, Christian Muslim. And he's praising Christian Muslims. He says, those people who have like the essence of Christianity and the essence of Islamic faith, they will bring peace to the world. Something, to take the essence of religion, as you said, absolutely. He says the word of Isavi, which means actually the follower of Jesus. Muslims who are the followers of Jesus. So it's a very interesting topic. So the second pillar is the 5 daily prayers. It shapes the daily routine of Muslims, basically. And this, to give you a sense of like the daily routine of a practicing Muslim, the daily routine. So in the morning, for example, you wake up early before sunrise. The prayer has to be before sunrise. It has to be practiced before sunrise. And then noon, the next prayer. Afternoon, the next prayer. Sunset, evening, and that's it, 5 times a day. If your time does not allow, you are traveling, you can combine 2 prayers. It's allowed. It's not easy. It's very challenging, but actually it's also very rewarding. Like 5 times a day. Muslims are generally do that. Not all Muslims, but it is really important in the Islamic teaching. Yes, please.
How long do the prayers take? Are they the same prayers 5 times?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Basically, each prayer has units. Like the morning prayer has 2 units, the required one. Noon prayer has 4 units. Afternoon prayer has 4 units. And 4 units, of course, you have to take ablution, which is cleansing of the body. You wash your hands, your face, your arm, your feet. If you don't go to restroom, your ablution is continuing. But if you go to restroom, you have to renew your ablution for other prayer, for the next prayer. And that takes about 10 minutes. So I would say approximately each prayer takes about 10 minutes. So if we say 5, totally throughout the day will be about 1 hour, approximately. But generally, if you do voluntary prayers, Prophet Muhammad used to spend 2/3 of his night in prayer. 2/3 of his night. So if you say his night was 9 hours, 6 hours in prayer. And that's why when you say, what was the life of Prophet Muhammad? The short answer is prayer. He was so much involved in prayer, actually. And this is something that we don't know. In our media, there is no mention of it. Muhammad is known as a warrior. Even in the time of war, he would say, prayer is more important than war. Let's have our prayer in congregation when the enemy was on the other side. So prayer for him was even more important than the time of the war and the war itself on the battlefield. And that's why in Islam, it is really important, five times a day. And as I said, sometimes they can be combined according to the situation of individuals. And then there is something called call for prayer. This is generally in the Islamic countries. In the United States, we don't hear it. But I took some of my colleagues to Turkey, and when we were back, and I said, what was the most striking thing, for you? And they said the most striking thing was to hear the call for prayer. Like in the middle of the day, people are on the street in their business, and suddenly you hear a voice coming from the top of the minarets saying God is the greatest. That's very striking, really. And it's 5 times a day. Sometimes in the early morning, everybody is sleeping, and you hear a beautiful voice coming again, inviting you to prayer. So maybe for Muslims, it become like a regular thing, but for those who are newly hearing it, it's very striking. It's very powerful, actually. Maybe Muslims accommodate to that. They don't have impact of it so heavily. But for those who are hearing newly, really, it's very powerful. And the person who is called muezzin. Has to have like a beautiful voice. It's actually like a job. He has to apply for it and then be appointed based on the beauty of his voice. This is like the top of minaret. I said, these are minarets, and the call for prayer comes from the top of the minaret. This is a mosque in Istanbul, actually. It's called Blue Mosque, a very beautiful mosque. And the third pillar is charity, to give charity. And that is, from money, is 2.5%. You have to give 2.5% to the poor. I put the list of the people who are eligible to receive charity. First of all, if you are poor, you don't have to give charity. You need charity. You receive charity. So basically, who are the recipients? Working poor. Working poor means that they are working, but still they are poor. Or if they don't have job, of course they are still poor. And the destitute, those who are unable to pay off their own debts, the charity goes to them. This actually originally it was collected by the state authority, and it will be distributed to the poor. But these days, Muslims are giving by themselves. They go and find poor people and distribute to them. Or some institution. They give to some institution, and those institutions are distributing. Like I think in Malaysia, when you have bank account, they say, would you like us to take out 2.5% from your account to the charity? So it is 2.5%. But when it's for like grain and other things, if it is irrigated by normal rain without spending on it, it is 10%. You give 10% as almsgiving to the poor. Like because you don't spend on it, it's much more just directly coming, and there is a more, like the right of poor in it, basically. And you have to give in a way that you are not expected to make the person indebted to you. It's not your money. It's God's money you give to the poor. So the person is not indebted. To you, he is or she is indebted to God, basically, because you have to give. And that's why one of my colleagues, who is a Catholic priest, once told me, he said, the thing that I like about Islam the most is that Islam made charity a compulsory, a duty. You have to give it, not if you wish it. It's a part of your job, it's part of your religion, you have to. It's like a requirement, basically. And then I think the fourth pillar is fasting in the month of Ramadan. And then I put this because Muslims are waiting for the sunset in the month of Ramadan. Imagine they have not eaten, like for 14 hours, especially these days in summer, and they are anxiously waiting for the sunset. So they don't eat, they don't drink for 14 hours. It's really very challenging. But it teaches you discipline, and you actually become aware of the situation of the hungry people, those who are hungry. If you are a rich person, you may have never experienced. But now, even if you are a rich person, you are experiencing hunger. And now you are understanding the situation of hungry people in the world, basically. I mean, before sunset, like half an hour before sunset, even like a piece of dry bread is more delicious than baklava, you know, like, because you are so hungry, basically. And the fifth pillar is pilgrimage. So in Islam, if you are financially capable, you have to go to Mecca. And Muslims actually are having this duty, financially capable and also health-wise, if your health allows. Every year, about 4 million Muslims are going to pilgrimage. 4 million in Saudi Arabia, in the city of Saudi Arabia. And I had like a rough calculation. I asked actually a travel agent, how much does it cost to go to Mecca for pilgrimage from the United States? And he said about $6,000. So if you don't have loans, and if you don't have, if you have money, and your health allows, once in your life, you have to make this pilgrimage. So you will spend $6,000 to go. Yes, please.
Do many mosque or communities have financial help for people who don't have the money?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, they are doing, they have some institutions. I know there are even some aid foundations. For example, I was part of actually a Muslim organization, Turkish Muslim organization here in Cleveland. And as we know, in the Feast of Sacrifice, Muslims are slaughtering an animal. And I said, you know, the best way, you know, share with your neighbor. Okay, now you share with your neighbor. Still you have some meat. So take this meat freshly and give to a food bank. Or take the money of it and give to the food bank. And poor people will go, we have food bank, Cleveland Food Bank. And actually they did it. I think it was like a good amount. And the people in food bank was very appreciating, you know, because it's really supported greatly. So this type of things is a part of charity. And I know Catholic charities are very powerful, very strong. But Muslim charities are also doing good work, you know, in that regard. And I know some charity foundations going to Haiti, for example. They go to Somalia, you know, when there was a famine for a while. So there are Muslims who are really very much involved in charity activities as well. So I think I will stop here. So this was the five, the last pillars of Islam. And let's see if we have questions. And then we will go forward. How much of time do you have, Deborah?
You have about 7 minutes.
7 minutes. Oh my God.
Since you had questions in between, I figured it.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, please. Any question comes to your mind, please feel free to ask, related or not related.
In the introduction, one of the things that was mentioned was Islamic approaches to the environment.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Actually, I teach a course called Islam and the Environment. In Islam, the environment is considered, you know, like the world of nature is considered as a divine art. And it's so significant to protect the environment. The protection of environment is very important. Human beings are considered the supervisors of in the realm of creation, but it doesn't mean that they have authority to do whatever they want. For example, you feel like a dog, a cat, a horse as brothers and sisters, because your creator is one. The one who created you created this dog, created this horse, etc. you feel connection to the mountains. Actually, it's very interesting. In Islam, when the Quran speaks of David, the one who would recite beautifully, singing the Psalms, the Quran says he was so much beautifully singing that the birds would come and sing with him. So nature, mountains would sing with David. Mountains, we know that they are, inorganic. They are not living creatures. But even mountains can actually be considered in the Islamic teaching as something with identity, and then can worship God. Like mountain is a co-worshipper of God with David in the Quranic language. So you look at the world of nature with that perspective. It is not random. It's not randomly done. It's a divine art. And how do you respond to a painting that is made by Picasso? Will you throw it to the trash? It's millions of dollars. Maybe, maybe I exaggerate, maybe 500,000, Anyway, but it's very precious. It's very precious. So each divine art is actually 100,000 times more precious than this art. Because that is divine art, this is Picasso art. It doesn't mean that Picasso art is not important. It is important, it's very important, but the divine art, at least it gives a sense of how divine art is important. And that's why the destruction of nature is considered the destruction of the divine art. You'll benefit it because God has created it for you, but benefit from it in a way that it will not be harmful. And that's very important, actually. Now they say because of our negative impacts on the environment, we have these hurricanes, because we are changing the course of nature by our behaviors. And that's why we are not supposed to actually act that way. We are supposed to make our planet beautiful, clean. And that's why, when we see something in the realm of nature, if there is ugliness, it is because of us. Every part of nature is clean if you have not touched it. It is clean. Go to places that human beings has not touched it, it's perfect. It's so clean. But when we touch, sometimes we make it dirty. And therefore, when we make it dirty, we should clean it up again. Because we are conscious creatures. We are not regular creatures. We are conscious. And therefore, we have to know how to do and how to, respond to the realm of nature. And to keep ecologic balance. Sometimes, I was listening to a program at the NPR, and some farmers, I think they were in some southern part of the United States, they were mentioning of using some chemicals. Maybe you heard of that. It was on NPR. And that chemical caused the death of some birds, some insects, because that was their intention. But that created a terrible result on the crops, on the farm. And now they say, that's disaster. The farm doesn't grow because of those chemicals. Well, if you play with the balance, the results could be really dangerous. And now actually he says, I don't know what to do now, To redo it, it's impossible because you already used those chemicals on the farm. So it is important to be aware of it and to keep the balance and keep the nature of nature as nature without, playing with it. It is enough for human beings if we really keep it clean and beautiful. It is enough. Now, there are some arguments that all people will die for starvation. In the Islamic teaching, there is a name of God called Al-Razaq. Al-Razaq is the one who gives sustenance to everybody. People will find something if we don't waste. If we waste, then it's our guilt. it's not because God does not provide. God has provided, but we throw it to the trash. So basically, it's enough for all human beings. I hope I was answered to your question. Yes, please.
Most of my students are, I have one senior who's Muslim, so most of my seniors are not. What's the most important understanding that of Islam that I want to leave them with next semester when they take my world religions class? What do I need, in your assessment, what's the most important thing that a Catholic or Christian kid in Akron, Ohio needs to understand about their Muslim brothers and sisters that live
Yeah, I
around
think,
them?
yeah, that's a very good question. I think what is important is that we share many values to prevent prejudice. Like, because prejudice is some part of our nature, and it is not a good nature, I would say, but it's in human nature. Sometimes when you see something that's not, it does not look like you, you have some strangeness towards the people. And I think this is not Quranic. I mean, the Quran says all peoples are from one. You all people, from Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve is from soil. So that's what the Quran says, the Islamic tradition says. And there is no superiority of, like one group over another group. You are all the same. The Prophet says people are the same like the teeth of a comb, equal. You are not superior because you are white. You are not superior because you are black. You are not superior because you are Muslim. You are not superior because you are Christian. You are human beings. Like to come. And I think one of the things that may be helpful in our society is that similarities that we share. Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are considered like one family, the same family. We are related to actually one family. Well, we may have differences, but the points that actually connecting us are so many. When we look at the differences, they become really very small percentage. I think there would be like one way to help to connect them to each other, and emphasizing that prejudice is a negative, and people might have some prejudice, and it requires some efforts to get rid of your prejudice, to know each other. There is a verse in the Quran that says, "We have created you from male and female, and divided you into different tribes, different nations, different ethnicities, so that you know each other." Know each other. To know each other is the essence. When you don't know someone, you feel strangeness. Actually, sometimes even you might have some negative feelings for them. But once you know them, you say, "Oh, they are like us." They are not different. And therefore, it's good to make some environment for people to get together, to eat together. Eating together is very important. Having food together. Once they asked the Prophet of Islam, "What is Islam?" He said, "To feed people." That is Islam. That's what he said actually. Because feeding and having food together makes connections. And I think one way to bring them together is very important. I have my son who is senior in high school, so I can tell you, he has very good connection with his friends. He's a good soccer player. That makes him a little bit popular. But not all Muslim students who are popular actually. So it's good to make connections and to get rid of prejudice, basically. I think that would be the best way. Yes, please.
Maybe one more question, and then we will adjourn for lunch.
Okay, one more question,
Mine's
please.
just simple. I just wondered if you would have access to your PowerPoint and notes.
Yes, actually, I can send it to you. Maybe if you give me your email, I will send it to you. Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much.